All right, my friends, welcome back to another V-Rising video. This is going to be a video going over every single spell jewel effect for every spell in V-Rising 1.1. And this is specifically going to be regarding spells in PvE before the PvP. The PvP jewel video is coming after this. It'll be another video by itself. I tried shooting them both together, but it ended up being like it was like an hour and a half and I was not even to the storm school, right? So I was in chill and it was an hour and a half and I was like, this is insane, taking way too long. And it was also kind of confusing jumping back between PvE and PvP. So I figured we would just break it down. I'm going to be alt tabbing between the wiki and the game just because it's way easier to not have to like shoot footage and then like splice it together. So we're just going to do it this way so I can demonstrate exactly for what's going on for each spell. So we're going to start here in the Blood Magic School, starting with Bloodrage. Bloodrage is a great spell. This is specifically for physical builds. And the reason for that, you can see here the only spell power scaling is the heal that you get from the initial cast. So if I press this button, I get a little bit of a heal, and that heals 65%, which is just not worth building around. So if we look at everything else on here, the jewel effects specifically, we can see physical power is one of the stats that it gives us, which is an incredibly powerful stat because it makes it so our weapon, not every single one of our weapon hits, whether it's the primary attack or any of our weapon skills, deals more damage. It scales our physical power by 15%, which then scales all of our other stuff, our weapon skills, skill damage. And then you can see here, I have more bonus physical power, more crit chance, crit damage, weapon skill power. So you can imagine how scaling the base stat into these other stats would just be so powerful. And just to showcase that, what that looks like, here's a hit without Bloodrage. You can see that's 219. And here's a hit with Bloodrage. Oh, let's do it again until it crits. 249. All right, so we're doing huge damage there as a damage bonus, which is just absolutely fantastic for weapon damage. You can imagine how much that would scale things like this, right? So if you do this and throw a Reaper E out, and it's just hitting for 400 damage on a Reaper E in PvE is absolutely incredible. So with that in mind, we want to build around that effect. So increasing the duration, this is the next most important thing here. So physical power, duration, these are what you want to run. The third stat for PvE that is just unreal is this one right here. Killing an enemy unit during the effect heals you for up to 2.4% of your maximum HP. This is equivalent to almost half of a Veil attack worth of healing. You know, you can imagine which is 5% of your maximum HP. So 2.4% off of per enemy is just unbelievable. You can imagine you're in Mortium fighting like five to 10 mobs at once. You take a bunch of damage, you just pop Bloodrage and you throw out a bunch of stuff, kill them, and you're just healing yourself by a ridiculous amount. And then finally, the last thing you put on here is kind of up to you. I would suggest putting on movement speed. You already get 10% movement speed here, so scaling it up by another additional 6% for a total of 16% is super useful for strafing and dodging enemies in PvE. Okay, next we're gonna go over to Bloodrite. This is one of my favorites. I put this one in S tier in my spell tier list video for PvE, and there's a very good reason for that. Specifically for, I mentioned the invisibility jewel, so it's already good without that jewel, but this effect is so absurd in PvE for survivability that it's kind of unbelievable unless you experience it firsthand. So to demonstrate that, I'm gonna show you, I have a jewel here with both the invisibility duration, increased invisibility during the immaterial duration and increased immaterial duration. So the way this invisibility works is that it is tied to the duration of the immaterial time, not anything else. Something like Slashers, the invisibility, if you do any action while you're invisible, you come out of it, right? So, right, you just come out of the invisibility. It doesn't matter how long it lasts. If you do any action, it breaks it. The invisibility for Bloodrite is tied to the duration of the immaterial. So if I do this, you can see I'm still invisible and attacking him while that's going on. So the reason that's so powerful, obviously attacking is really nice. So if I use something like pistols and go like this, I could be shooting and just like, while I'm invisible, I'm just shooting something for free, which is really useful. But the big one is this right here. So let's say I take some damage If I have to heal, I need to pop a potion. Look how long I am invisible while this healing animation is going off. So I have almost completely got the potion usage off before the invisibility duration goes away. And the reason that's so powerful for PvE is when you are invisible, you drop aggro from the enemy. They will just stop attacking completely. They'll just look around like, huh, I think I was attacking somebody. And then when you come out of that invisibility duration, it takes them a second. I'll show you right here with this mob. It takes them a second to like reacquire you as a target. And then they have to wind up again and then hit you, especially if you create space. So I'm going to go invisible here, stand next to him, and look at this. Now he is hitting me again. You can see how long that took us. Do it one more time here. So that's how long it takes him after the invisibility duration for that to work. So you can see how easy it would be to just get a Blood Rose potion off. And then you could do something like combine that with your dash, your veil, which, you know, to leave that silhouette. And so what happens is you go like this, dash, and then they're attacking this and you're just full healing with that potion. And now they've reacquired you and you're just completely full health. So with that in mind, after that, what you put on is somewhat up to you. I would completely ignore this as a useless stat. I would completely ignore this. It's a useless stat. But otherwise, it's fairly up to you. If you want to maximize for physical damage, this is the best physical thing for PvE. Followed by this one here, probably, and then the primary attack here. So if you want to do maximize for damage, you just do this one here with damage, and then this one. And if you really just want to have like probably the overall best in slot for the most situations, I would do increased immaterial duration, invisible for that duration, daggers, and then either heals or damage. So heals is really useful too, because 50% of your spell power, right now I'm a physical build, but 50% of my spell power, let's say I had a witch potion on, it'd be about 49. 50% is about 25 HP. Then you have to imagine I'm applying leech with my, with the Bloodrite, and if I have daggers on this, I would be applying leech that way. And then my attacks like this. I'll just show you what this looks like. You can see altogether there was about 45 HP that I just healed back there. 40 to 45. Okay. Next one up is Shadowbolt. This spell, I would not suggest using this primarily for PvE. At endgame, once you have anything else, it's pretty much going to be better than this. The problem is just it hits one time and it doesn't really do it's just a single target hit. As this very minor thing here where it can do a 30% damage in an AoE, but who cares? 30% is literally nothing. So, but if you really for some reason wanted to maximize this, these three here is what I would first look at. So hitting a target affected by leech does bonus damage. Hitting a target affected by leech heals you. Okay, those are pretty cool. And then obviously do an AoE. So altogether you can combine this with this. It's a bonus 80% spell power. After that, I would probably just do increased cast rate so that you can get it off faster and then keep moving. But otherwise, I would just suggest not using this spell in PvE. It's really just not all that great. All right, Veil of Blood. This one's pretty cool. For PvE, I would suggest you running this with another blood spell, specifically so you can use this effect here, next primary attack within 3 seconds on an enemy affected by a leech. Increases your physical damage output by 16%. This is like the Blood-Rage effect. So if you're going to run Blood-Rage, I would even consider, I would suggest giving this a try to see how it feels. So you can get the Blood-Rage 16%, and then this and Veil of Blood 16% for that 4-second duration. To just double up. Let's see if I even have that effect on this. I don't think I have it on this jewel. Let's see, I don't have a jewel. Okay, I don't have the jewel on that, but you can imagine it would be something like this. And you just have a huge 32% physical damage bonus for those 4 seconds, and you can just go ham with greatsword hits, or whatever it may be, axes, or I don't have axes on right now, but whatever it may be, just go absolutely crazy for those 4 seconds. Then after that, increase the amount of heal that you get, super powerful, and then increase the damage on the next primary attack. So all together, that's what I would look at running. You could also consider running dashing through enemies inflicts leech to make it easier to proc this as well, and other like on-hit leech effects. But really, I think if you're going to run this, you just run it with like Blood-Rage or something, or Bloodrite, and make it that much easier for yourself. So again, just to give you an idea what that looks like, these two here with this one, and then yeah, dashing through afflicts leech is what I would suggest. Okay, next thing we're gonna look at is Blood Fountain. This one is kind of up to you. You can kind of lean into it in two directions. First and foremost, I just highly recommend using the recast. This is just required for this spell, in my opinion, to really make it pop. Just because having that secondary recast is really just super powerful. So with that in mind, you then can kind of lean into two directions. You can do the initial hit. You can do like increased healing with these two effects here, or you can do increased damage with this. So overall with PvE, I would honestly probably run all four of these to maximize for the amount of healing and damage that you're dealing. However, there is something to be said about, something to be said about, I guess you could say knockback or something, or maybe like remove negative effects on an ally, where you can kind of like help. Actually, knockback, I would probably say for ally specifically, if you're in like a duo, there are certain situations like Mortium mobs, the Ripper Beasts and all that stuff, where they hit some, or like the Night Maidens, where they jump on you and stun you, or the Night Maidens like charm you, where you can kind of just cast this spell from long range with a knockback jewel. Let's see if I have it. I think I do. And you just cast it from long range, and that little knockback will interrupt that charm or the stun that they're doing, which can help your ally a lot. Okay, next we're looking at Sanguine Coil. This is a PvE hero right here. What a crazy spell for PvE, especially in team play. If you have an ally or another ally that you're with, this thing is absolutely wild. And I would suggest the first and foremost, this is required to play this spell pretty much at all to make it like really like just super strong, is bouncing towards an additional target after the first hit, which is just incredible because there's so many situations where there's mobs in your way, and if you want to heal your ally but there's mobs in your way, then you really just want to make sure that you have a way to bounce off things to get to your ally, because this thing is up. And then also with that in mind, you also want to increase the maximum charges by 1. And what this ends up doing, assuming I have those, yes I do. What this ends up doing, you can do things like this with, if you're running like let's do this. Running Draculan Scholar, you can do stuff like this where you have a lot of spell resets. And what happens is all 4 of those charges give you spell charges, right? And so each one of these is giving me whatever it is, however many that is, 18 every single time. So you can see, imagine I'm just sitting here spamming this, and I get 72 off of 1 round. I do this, right? And then I'm like, okay, let me pop another spell. Now I'm at 94. I get a reset. Get another recast, why not? Here's another one. And because it has such a low cooldown, you can see where it just keeps going over and over and over. We're just keep on bouncing over and over again and just heal a ton. So bouncing and heals, super powerful. And then increase, you can either do increase the healing received, increase damage dealt, those are super good, but I would actually suggest using lethal attacks restore a charge. So these 3 here, bouncing, maximum charge, and lethal attacks restore a charge, are just simply amazing, because if you imagine you're fighting a bunch of mobs, this thing bounces 1 time, hits a mob and kills it. Now you're just getting more charges back. So you have 4, but imagine you're just throwing it into a group. You're combining it with like another spell, maybe like Blood Fountain or something. You're just spamming 2 things like this, and you're sorry. You're just hitting 2 things, you're spamming 2 things like this. And then you're spamming everything like this. You're just spamming blood like absolutely crazy. Spamming charges, healing everything. Just literally just keeping everyone at maximum HP and then restoring those charges with every single lethal attack you do. So super powerful jewel effect. So I would do something like, I would actually consider probably running this one, dealing bonus damage to enable that lethal attacks a lot easier for you. So running like this, and then these three right here. I would probably consider that likely best in slot, but if you don't really want to run that, and maybe you just want to fully maximize your heals, then go ahead and run increase the healing amount received. All right, and Carrion Swarm. This one's a pretty cool one. We're getting some weird graphical stuff here, I think, by swapping back and forth. Some weird going on, but Carrion Swarm, super powerful. The issue with Carrion Swarm right now is it has a very hard to land sweet spot, but you do want to be able to learn the spacing on it, and if you land it, it can just do so much damage. So it did about almost 200 damage, and then it popped for 31 at the end. Let's do it again. Yeah, super powerful there. Let's actually toss on a Spell Power Reaper. Let's see, do we have it? Okay, we do. Let's go ahead and toss on the Spell Power Reaper. There you go. So that was about 200 damage there. And then it pops here for 34. So you can see where it starts doing a lot of damage. It's like, to me, it's like just a better Shadowbolt overall. You just learn to space this. You can do tons of damage. what you'll want to be using, I have the stun jewel currently for PvP, but what I would suggest doing is just every one of these four right here for PvE. So you want to do applies vampiric curse, bonus damage of each bat, explodes when you reach the maximum distance, and then heal yourself for 8% of the HP for all of the damage that you deal to them. So that right there is probably the best in slot jewel for PvE on Bloodbats or Carrion Swarm. All right, we're going over to the Chaos Tree. Crazy powerful spell school, especially for PvE. Just unbelievably powerful for PvE. And we're going to talk about Aftershock. So when it comes to PvE, or when it comes to Chaos spell school, the number one most powerful spell effect on the entire school is this effect right here. Hitting a target affected by Ignite engulfs in agonizing flames, dealing up to 6% damage, that's spell damage, and 12% of your spell power 5 times. So that's an additional 30% damage and heals you for 60% of your spell, or 60% spell power, right? So that is on top of regular Ignite. So you can see I have that jewel right here. We have right there on the third thing there, you can see that. So if you learn to space this, or if the enemy has a big enough hitbox, you can hit it twice with one thing, and you can just immediately get this agonizing flames going on them. You can see where it's double ticking. That is Ignite and agonizing flames at the same time. So right here, you can see it's ticking 2 times. It's Ignite and agonizing flames. They stack on top of each other. So you can imagine then if you're running something like Renewing Flames, which heals you for the Ignite damage you're dealing, and then Chaos Killing, which does bonus Ignite damage. You can see where that all of that bonus damage would just stack up to unbelievable amounts. So I'm kind of hitting that guy's stuff too. We're gonna move over here so we don't grief him. There we go. And so we gotta space this out right here because he has a small hitbox. You can see where we're just gonna hit him with 2 explosions. If you hit right in the little center here of the 2 explosions like that, you can see where it's hitting twice. So that is what makes this spell so strong. Some people were wondering why I put this so high on PvE, on my PvE spell tier list. They were like, oh, what's wrong with it? This spell's not that great. No, it is that great. It is extremely powerful if you learn to space it, or if the enemy has a large hitbox. There's also situations like when you're fighting Angora, where there are 5 billion spiders running at you and there's just so much stuff in your way. Well, this ground AoE just goes right through them to hit the target that you're aiming at, which is and it's such a fast thing. Look how fast I recover by casting this. Look, I just cast it and I keep going. You can also cancel the animation, the recovery animation, by dashing like this. So, right, so you can just do that right there. So boom. So the second it comes out, we dash, and immediately you can see where it is just immediately going, and you don't have that recovery animation where you cast and you can start walking again. Just dash. Whoops, let's do it again. Right, immediately we go, and it's just doing huge damage, which is what makes it super powerful. Sorry, back to the spell jewels. So what we do with that in mind, what we want to do is we want to maximize for that. Agonizing Flames, damage, cooldown, and then either projectile range, which is super nice to make it really, really big, or yeah, I would just probably or knockback, I guess. I probably wouldn't do knockback. I'd probably do these 2 to make max damage, cooldown, and then projectile range and speed. Huge spell. Okay, Power Surge. This is another physical spell, similar to Bloodrage, but it works super well as an enabler for Agonizing Flames. If you're going to run Agonizing Flames builds, even on physical, you could take advantage of it. So for instance, I would specifically run this if you are running Veil of Chaos on your build. Veil of Chaos has an Agonizing Flames jewel. So I would specifically run that with this because you can, essentially you can apply Power Surge like this. Now he's Ignite on him, I dash attack, and now he has Agonizing Flames on him, right? So that is a really good way to do that. So the thing that happens with Power Surge as well that some people may not really realize is it also does all of my physical attacks, including things like this. Sorry, I keep thinking I have axes on, including things like this. Weapon skills apply that Ignite as well, which makes it really useful to get Ignite on things. So you can imagine if we have axes and there's a bunch of enemies all together, I can go Power Surge and I can Axe E and everything in a giant AoE. You're now doing physical damage, bonus physical damage with that bonus physical damage jewel right here. And everything's getting Ignite on top of that. So with that in mind, remember we mentioned we want to maximize for that that physical damage. We want to also increase our duration. We can also combine that with lethal attacks, make it longer, up to 5 times. You get a 5-second longer power surge, which is just absolutely ridiculous. So these 3 here just work super well together. I highly caution you against using this effect here, recast to consume to detonate doing 60% spell power. This is trash, and the reason why you have to think about it this way, cool, I did a little bit of an AoE around me, but you are removing the buff to do that damage. And because you're removing the buff, what's going to do more damage? 60% spell power and inflicting ignite, or having a stupidly long bonus damage to 50, it's actually 16% physical damage on your character. I'm going to tell you now, this is way better. And then with that on top, with that as well, I would also highly recommend using the increased attack speed with that. So what ends up happening is you have increased attack speed, physical damage, and duration, and you can just sit there going like this. Huge attack speed, right? For a really super long amount of time, doing a bonus damage. Okay, Chaos Volley, ridiculously powerful spell. What do you know? What has one of our favorite effects? The thing that's so amazing about Chaos Volley as well is every single jewel effect on this is good. PvE, you could argue that knockback isn't all that useful. It's useful for mobbing. For bossing, it doesn't really matter. So for killing like regular patrols, knockback is kind of nice. But for killing bosses, it doesn't really matter. Other than that, every other jewel effect on here is incredibly good. So first and foremost, Agonizing Flames. Next thing we're going to do is increase damage. Then we're going to do cooldown. And then we're going to do projectile range and speed, or hitting a different target with a second projectile does bonus damage. The reason I'm saying that's useful is if you miss, you can then hit them with that second thing to do big damage, or you can hit one and then another. So if there's like 2 enemies around you, you can go like, okay, I'm going to hit him and then hit him, and they just both take huge damage. So he takes a first amount of damage, and then that one takes a gigantic additional bonus damage. You get that ignite damage applied to them super quickly. So yeah, all in all, I would say this one here, and then damage, and then cooldown, and then it's between projectile range and speed, or this one here. I would probably suggest projectile range and speed for PvE overall, but again, this is actually kind of useful. But projectile range and speed, I probably would, now that I'm thinking about it, I'd probably recommend that specifically because it's so useful to have that. Look how long range that is. In a PvE, you can just sit there permanently kiting things and just hitting them from literally across the entire map. Okay. Veiled Chaos, super strong. Agonizing Flames, first and foremost. Next thing we're going to look at, increased bonus damage of primary attack. Then we're going to do increased illusion damage when it explodes, and then we're going to do spawn second illusion, which makes it so you dash. Each of your 2 dashes spawns an illusion. Each of those deal bonus damage, and your primary attack does bonus damage as well. And obviously Agonizing Flames. You want to get as many instances of Agonizing Flames, and as many ways to get Agonizing Flames as possible. So you run this, and this. So that's pretty straightforward. That's the spell for sure in PvE. Void. Same thing, similar to Chaos Volley, but even better. Any of these are good. Literally anything. Agonizing Flames, first and foremost. Engulf the area to deal damage. Spawn 3 fragments. Those are the 3 big damage ones, and you can also do increased damage. But there's also something to be said about charge rate, so you can send them out more. If you're playing a high recast build, this might not be worth it for you, but still, it's very strong. In range, similar to Chaos Volley, just having more range can be super useful to hit things from really far away. Regardless, these 2 here, this one here for damage, and then probably just increase damage to maximize your overall PvE damage potential. Chaos Barrier, this one's incredibly powerful for PvE. It's with these jewels on here. I'm going to show you what this looks like. First and foremost, this right here is super easy to get whenever you are in PvE. You charge up whenever you take 5 hits. It charges, and you just suddenly get a power surge with no jewels on it. So you charge up and get a power surge, which is like applying more ignite. You're attacking faster, moving faster for a little bit of time for up to 4 seconds. You can see why that would be so powerful, especially against certain bosses like Valencia right here, or anything that has, attacks that do like multiple hits super fast. You can see where that would be really nice to have. So I would suggest running it with that. Increased damage per charge, explodes on hit, dealing bonus damage, and then absorbing attacks reduces the cooldown. Those are the 3 that I would suggest running in PvE. These 3 here, and then the power surge effect. Rite of Chaos, another spell that you pretty much can't go wrong. So first and foremost, there's Agonizing Flames, unbelievable. Then I would say 30% chance to spawn a Greater Meteor, just amazing. Additional meteor at the end, amazing. And then the first meteor engulfs the area. You can use this one. This is really good, but I would also suggest looking at the increased cooldown as well. But regardless, the only one that may not be worth looking at all that much is the Fading Snare, but it is also super useful for like doing like incursion events. So yeah, but overall, I would suggest these 4, but if you don't necessarily want the cooldown, do the first meteor engulfs the area. All right, we are going over to the Unholy Tree. Bone Explosion, unbelievably strong for PvE, but this one specifically, I would say if you get with the right dual effects, becomes just super powerful, just unbelievably powerful. Here is what I would look at here. Nova Projectile, super useful to apply wide range AoE condemn, even if something's like outside of the AoE itself, they could still get that condemn on them and get a little bit of damage. I would also look at triggers a second explosion to deal bonus damage. You're just increasing the amount that, you know, it's already doing 150. Now it's doing 200 if the both things hit the enemy, 200% spell power, and applying condemn. Next thing I would look at here, you could have bonus damage is super useful. This is also super useful for cooldown, but the big one here, there are kind of 2 things you can look at. Maybe 3 things. So the bonus executing, this is an execute effect. If they're below 30% health, you deal bonus damage. And then it reduces the cooldown of your lethal attacks, reduce the cooldown. So if you time it on mobs, that's really nice, really useful. You can like get multiple or super fast chains of Bone Explosion. Whatever it's called. Yeah, Bone Explosion. I was going to call it Corpse Explosion, but its old name, but it's Bone Explosion now. On Bone Explosion, you can reduce the cooldown on it. If you time it really well, you plan for that, it is super useful. However, what I would suggest looking at if you're running a summon build, use this effect right here. Hitting an ally skeleton causes it to explode after 2.5 seconds, dealing up to 80% magic damage. To just show you what that looks like, I don't have that on my jewel here, but the same jewel is on this Ward of the Damned right here. It looks like this. So let's say I have a skeleton. I can apply this agony effect, and then it will explode and deal bonus damage like that. So instead of it just sitting there smacking something, it can just explode and do a ton of damage. And so if you have some way to get a lot of summons like this, you can imagine doing this and getting a bunch of guys with agony, and then they just all detonate for absolutely hilariously large amounts of damage. So I would suggest looking at that. However, if you don't necessarily like that, you can also, if you just like it so your skeletons stay up as long as possible, this is a required jewel effect for that specific effect. Me personally, I like the condemn explosions, but if you just like having your skellies around and dealing a bunch of damage, I would suggest looking at this because this allows you to get just obscene amounts of skeletons up because it resets their lifetime and heals them. So you can like do something to get a bunch of skeletons, like you can use like a Corrupted Skull, get a bunch of skeletons, and then you can come here and whenever they're about to time out, you can just heal them and get a heal them and reset their lifetime, and then throw more Corrupted Skulls and just get a gigantic skeleton army. So if you're not going to do this, run this, and vice versa. So again, we're going to look at that really quickly. I'm going to say these 2 here. This is probably going to be damage and or the execute effect, and then you're going to do either heals or agonizing the agony effect in your skeletons. All right, back up to Ward of the Damned, crazy spell again. Again, I would suggest using this personally. The hitting an ally, hitting an ally skeleton causes it to explode. The little recast thing, just absolutely incredible. But if you don't like that, if you want to have them be up as much as possible, then use Empower and Shields. If you want these skeletons to stay up as much as possible, you want to use those 2 specifically, so you can make them stronger and make them stay up for a super long amount of time. Next thing here that's going to be extremely good for if you want if you want them to stay up for a long amount of time, you want to do a 40% chance you spawn a skeleton mage. If you don't, again, if you want to do the agony explosion, don't even worry about running this. It's probably not even really all that useful in my opinion, because you do kind of, you could run both of them if you wanted to. Skeleton mages are strong, but I would probably just have it be like a rush down, explode everything around them kind of thing. But again, if you want your as many skeletons as possible, shield, empower, skeleton mage. And the last thing that is the best stat on this otherwise is absorbing a projectile heals you for 45% of your spell power. I have cheesed bosses so early with this. I've killed Brutal Angora. There she is. She's level 63, so level 66. I've killed Brutal Angora with Ward of the Damned when I was at level 50. Okay, just keep that in mind. Killed her at level 50 because I had this jewel effect that was maxed out. So every time she did her little like spammy attacks or a ton of projectiles all at once, I would absorb like 5 times or whatever it was and just immediately healed my all damage I had taken, which is instantly healed because of the amount of healings I got from this. All right, Corrupted Skull, crazy spell for PvE. This thing is insane. First and foremost, get this one right here. Launch 2 spiraling projectiles instead of 1, and each projectile deals 50% of the original damage. So yes, it does less damage, but the reason you want 2 is because it summons 2 skeletons. Let's see if we have that jewel effect. I'm assuming we do. Yes. So each of these summons 2 skeletons. You have 2 charges, 2 skeletons each. You can imagine we just suddenly have 4 of them going all at once. Let's do it again. You have 4 of them going all at once, and then we can do this. They all have agony, and suddenly 188 bonus damage on the detonation. Just absolutely absurd. This is just the best thing for summon builds. This spell is, especially with this jewel effect right here. Just immediately get as many skeletons as you possibly can with 2 charges, especially if you have spell charge gain like this. You can imagine 2 charges. We were going to get double on that. Gives us more resets. Suddenly it's charged. And just like that, we get a reset. We can do 2 more, right? It's already almost charged again. We're going to do it again. We got 6 now. We're going to recast all of them. 282 damage. There wasn't even any crits in there. I mean, you could just see how utterly insane that kind of damage is. They also have right here, hitting an allied skeleton causes it to explode with that little agony effect. If you want that, you can use that as well. But for me, if you don't, yeah, that is good if you don't have any other agony effects. But personally, I might combo this with like Ward of the Damned or Bone Explosion, so you can get like use this to get as many skeletons out at once, then do big combos. But regardless, if you like this, is also super useful. Conjures Bone Spirit. I would suggest using this because it applies Condemn to everything in an area. So there's a bunch of mobs, like you're in Mortium doing incursion events. Use this skeleton thing to just immediately do an AoE, a little Bone Spirit to do an AoE of Condemn on everything in an area around. And remember, when things with Condemn die, they summon skeletons. So you can see where all of this is going. So I would do damage probably. I would do Spiral for 2. And then I would probably either do this one or projectile range and speed, and then the Bone Spirit. Veil of Bones. Okay, dashing through and enemies inflicts Condemn. I would suggest using this unless if you're full Condemn build, like everything you're using is Condemn. Maybe don't use this, but otherwise it's just super useful to be able to have a immediate way to apply that Condemn to groups. But otherwise, you have summon an enemy. So this one right here is literally what that agony skeleton, the skeleton that you summon whenever you hit, instead does the agony explosion. So this one's, in my opinion, is super useful if you like those agony effects. The next thing I would look at here is next primary attack summons a skeleton mage instead of a skeleton warrior. I probably wouldn't use both of these together because whenever you want the mage, you want it to be alive as long as possible because it does a lot of damage. So I would not use this and this personally. And if you do that, you would have this. You could then do heals. If you dash through people, you heal them and reset their lifetime. So if you have a bunch of skeletons, if you're doing a really heavy like skeleton auto attack damage build, you want this and you want this right here. And then finally, so all together we have these 2 and then this one or this one, right? And then you just have bonus damage on your next primary attack. So again, you just want to decide, do I want agony explosions or do I want to make it so my skeletons last a long period of time? All right, Death Knight, super powerful for PvE, just serves as a big distraction. This right here is, in my opinion, is best in slot for it. Just having a % chance to summon a skeleton mage. Whenever you get recasts, you can just get so many Death Knights and so many skeleton mages going all at once. I would suggest doing damage dealt by the Death Knight heals you, and then I would do increased damage, and then either the increased health and lifetime, you can do those 2. Maybe I would take this off actually. Or either the damage off or the healing off for these 2. These 2 are just best in slot for this. You want it to last long and you want it to not die easily. Okay, Soulburn. So this one is super powerful for PvE. Increased number of targets hit, kind of required in my opinion. I would then look at hitting an enemy. You can do this. Again, if you like those agony explosions, this is a really good way to do it. Otherwise, you can also combine that with this to summon a skeleton. You can get so many skeletons so quickly, increase targets, and so 100% chance to summon a skeleton warrior. So you get like a group of enemies, you just hit all of them at once. It does like whatever it is, like 4 skeletons immediately. And then if you have recasts, you could do this to get those condemned if you wanted to. If you don't want that, no big deal. Just do increase life drain is what I would probably suggest. This guy's doing bounces, no big deal. I would do increase life drain because the life drain that you get is super strong. It's a nice way to get huge heals because you're hitting so many things all at once. So you hit everything all at once, you just get a huge amount of life drain off of those things that you hit. So increase targets hit, either skeleton explodes and or summon a skeleton, and then increase life drain. And then I would probably do castrate so you can get it off much faster. If not, you just do bonus damage. And finally, Unholy Chains. So this one here for PvE is kind of a little bit strange. I would not suggest using this for PvE because the issue with this is it only hits a single target. So who really cares? You can add little bone spirit, but like if you're going to do that, just use Corrupted Skull, you know? And then other than that, you could say spawns a nova of projectiles, which is kind of useful. And then you could do heal yourself. And then you could do increased duration. You could also do damage over time, wherever it is. Yeah, this right here, damage over time. But for me, again, I probably wouldn't recommend using this all that much. If you like it, though, I totally get it. I would do Bone Spirit, Nova, healing maybe, and then probably just duration so it does more damage. All right, Illusion Tree, super fun. Wraith Spear, crazy spell for PvE. First things first, damage penalty reduced because you're going to be hitting multiple targets. So you want to decrease the damage penalty for hitting multiple targets. You then want to do increase the damage that it does. Both those kind of go hand in hand. This is super useful if you're in a duo or squad or whatever. You can shield your allies who are on the front line. Same thing if you have a bunch of weaken going on. You can do this to summon wisps that can heal your allies. It's super useful. Otherwise, you have hitting a weakened enemy grants you a shield, which is kind of cool. But for me, I would kind of just focus more on damage penalty, increased damage, and then probably like projectile range and or just any of these, you know, hitting a weakened enemy or shielding your spell powers or shielding your allies. Okay. All right, and now we're gonna go look at Phantom Aegis. Overall in PvE, I probably wouldn't recommend using Phantom Aegis, but if you want to use it, one thing I would look at doing is using it on a spell power build. Where right here, you can, it's like the spell power version of Bloodrage, where you can cast it on yourself or an ally and increase their spell power to do more damage. And then you can also do synergies with it, where you use a spell, an effect like this, Spiritual Infusion, this passive, where if an enemy has weaken on them, then you do 8% bonus spell damage. So you can use that with this to kind of like, if there's enemies around you, you can just apply this, all of them get weakened, you get bonus spell damage, and then you just do 24% bonus spell power, and then also deal bonus spell damage to them with that passive effect. Other than that, I might look at Fear. I would definitely look at duration, spell power, and then maybe knockback, and then Fear probably. If you're playing on a team, you can technically get your allies out of bad situations with the recast effect. So if like one of your allies is in a weird spot, you can cast this on him and then recast it and pull him to you to save him. So otherwise, I would just say you could probably move speed, honestly. I'd do like these 3 here, and then either knockback or Fear for best in slot. All right, Spectral Wolf, super powerful. First things first, the bounce heal effect, you want this for sure. Penalty per bounce, you want that. Then you want maximum bounces, you want that. And then you can pick one of these 3. I would probably say this right here is the best way to keep your Phantasm stacks up if you're running multiple weaken effects, like Wraith Spear into Spectral Wolf is a super powerful combo for that reason, where like you hit a bunch of enemies with Wraith Spear, then you hit them with this, and suddenly you just get like infinite Phantasm stacks. But otherwise, you have those same like consume weaken for Wisp and consume weaken, give a shield, that kind of thing. But all in all, I would look at bounces, reduced penalty, and healing first, and then just kind of pick your favorite on the other ones. Veil of Illusion. So this one here, first thing I would do is look at the Phantasm effect here. Phantasm is just a super powerful effect for giving more spell recasts as well as spell cooldown. So right here, it just makes it really nice to be able to dash and get that. Next, I would look at an AoE detonation whenever you recast it to deal weaken damage in an AoE. Then you can look at the respawn your illusion to shoot little projectiles if you want to. This is pretty cool. But if you don't want that, you can definitely look at this one here to shield. Whenever you hit an enemy with weaken, you could shield yourself. Getting it stacks up to 3 times. You can see if you're running like full illusion, where you're just getting huge shields by keeping this going. Kind of a cool effect. But all in all, I would look at Phantasm. I would look at AoE detonation. I might consider doing the spawn thing here for this. And then I would probably run this one right here. So this would allow us to have like projectiles, more weaken is always nice for that. And then, yeah, I would look at this effect here. Otherwise, if you don't want this, just run damage. All right, Mosquito. Luckily, Mosquito doesn't have all that many effects on it. It's only 5 to choose from. So really what I would do here is probably just damage first and foremost. And then these 3 right here, bonus maximum health so that the mosquito doesn't die too very quickly. Shield your allies. You can shield it on top of yourself, or you can shield your allies. And then spawn 3 healing wisps to heal yourself. This is just amazing. The fear duration, I think, is not really all that necessary for PvE, so I wouldn't even look at that. So yeah, I would do this one here, and then these 3 right there. Trance, pretty trash for PvE overall until you get very specific jewel effects, then it can be super powerful. I would suggest using this specifically for if you're going to use it, run it on a physical build where you're running big weapon skill damage, and you just have this right here. If you hit it when it triggers, it resets your Q effect pretty much instantly if you have it max rolled, which is extremely powerful. Then I would look at, honestly, I would look at Phantasm right here. And other than that, it's just not all that great. Distance traveled can be useful for PvE. And then other than that, I mean, movement speed probably, or next primary attack does bonus damage. Those are what I would look at here. But really, the spell isn't the greatest for PvE. Amazing for PvP, but not the greatest for PvE. So I would specifically do this one here. Increase your secondary, decrease the cooldown of your Q effect, your Q ability. And then Phantasm. And then kind of just pick between the ones that you want otherwise. All right, Curse. This one can be super useful if you have things like Reign of Chaos to do a bunch of damage to clear mobs altogether. But if you don't have that, this one's a little bit rough. First and foremost, you want to do the increased damage modifier. This makes it so it's easier to hit that 500% bonus damage cap or whatever. You want to have that be increase the damage modifier. You want the duration to last longer, again, giving you more chances to do that. And then I would suggest doing knockback. Actually isn't super bad on this for mobbing to keep enemies away from you, but otherwise I would suggest doing you could do damage on a hit and then spawn wisp to heal yourself. But personally, what I would do is I would do modifier, I would do duration, I would do reapply weaken on hit or whenever it triggers, because that enables all those things like, you know, hitting an enemy affected by weaken gives you all these different effects. Makes it super easy to get that triggered whenever you reapply the weaken whenever it ends. All right, over to the Frost School. We're almost done here, wrapping up pretty quickly. Frost Ice Nova is really powerful if you're running additional version or different forms of chill. And again, there's not all that many things here, so it's not super difficult to decide what to do. First and foremost, bonus damage on enemies afflicted by chill or frozen. That bonus damage to things that are chilled means you're going to be doing 200% spell power. There's also a bunch of there's also ways to increase damage to chilled enemies like this, Cold Soul. So you can do, and you can also combine that with things like weaken and spiritual fusion and renewing flames to just get like huge 24 damage bonus damage to things like chill, weaken, and ignited targets. You can get huge combos with that. But yeah, regardless, I would do this. I would do the recast, and then I would do reduces cooldowns. Range is nice, but I would probably just do shield because 80% of your spell power is shield on top of you or your allies. That's my recommendation. So I would really just do these 3 here and bonus damage to chilled enemies. All right, Cold Snap. If you want to run Cold Snap, it's useful, but I would say it's not as good as it used to be for PvE because it doesn't have the immaterial effect. However, let's go ahead and look at this. I would do increase the shield absorb amount. I would do when triggered, deal bonus damage and inflict chill in your next primary attack. I would do increased move speed whenever it triggers, and increased damage. You can do increased freeze duration on chilled targets if you want, but I just don't think that's really necessary personally. This is a useless stat. Don't even run this. Who cares? I mean, just press the button at the right time and then you don't have to worry about how fast you're moving whenever you're channeling it. So yeah, damage and then shield, and then these two right here, increase movement speed, and your next primary attack does bonus damage. Frostbat, giga crazy spell at the moment, with especially with this, hitting an enemy that has chill or frozen splinters into 8 projectiles. Hitting a chill or frozen enemy does 80%, shields you for 80% spell power, or it does bonus damage. So what I personally would do is the splinters. I would do the hitting a chilled enemy does bonus damage. Frost impact does 60% damage in AoE, and then I would do probably castrate or projectile range and speed. And you will be hitting for insanely hard and a huge AoE and keeping chill on a bunch of enemies. Veil of Frost, really useful for applying chill, but also for big heals and shield amounts. Increase shield amounts of your spell power. Do a Nova of Ice in an AoE, and then your next primary attack conjures a Nova or a Frost Nova in an AoE. All of those are just incredibly powerful. 1, 2, 3, and then the last but not least, do bonus damage. Those are best in slot. The other ones aren't all that great for PvE. Sure. Crystal Lance pierces. It is a huge amount of damage. You want to hit as many people as you possibly can all at once. Hitting chilled enemies does a huge chunk of damage. Already does 160. With this perfect roll, this is doing 230% spell or frost damage. You can see how that's just insane. Then you have, again, hitting an enemy, and gives you that, the shatters into projectiles. So what I would do here is pierces. I would do castrate. I would do bonus damage to shield or frozen enemies, and I would do the splinters projectile thing. The reason you want castrate is it takes a second to get this thing off. It just takes way too long. So that is what I would suggest for this spell. Frost Barrier, unbelievably insane spell for PvE. Increased damage first and foremost. Then you want where is it here? Absorbing reduces the cooldowns. Absorbing increases your spell power. Those 3, and then those are just insanely strong for PvE and for PvP, and for that matter, but PvE specifically. And then the last one is kind of up to you. I would probably say hitting a chilled or frozen enemy with a cone gives you a shield at the end. So they not only do they trigger it like 8 times or something. These people are just wanting me to be right next to wherever they are while they're doing things. So not only are you doing a bunch of damage, but you're also getting a shield at the end. All right, Arctic Storm. For this one, we are going to go heal our damage dealt. We're doing bonus damage, and we're doing shield self afterwards. And then the end is kind of up to you. What I would probably suggest doing is the movement speed while you're casting, so you can kind of like maneuver a little bit better while you're casting it. That would be my recommendation. So you're looking for these 3 here, and then shield self whenever you activate. All right, back over to the Storm Magic. Again, they're just following me for some reason. Back over to the Storm Magic on our last spell school. Ball Lightning, incredibly powerful spell for PvE. 450% magic damage is a just absolutely hilarious amount of damage. So we're going to do increased damage per shock, obviously. We're going to do increased projectile range. We're doing consume static to stun is actually okay. Honestly, as long as you have this, that's all you really need to make this powerful. I actually personally would not suggest using this in PvE. It can be useful, but I wouldn't suggest using this because if you run a lot of resets, it can make it kind of annoying where you're like holding the spell down and like you want to throw 2 at once, but you accidentally detonate 1, right? If you don't want 2 active at one time, you don't want to accidentally detonate it. So I would suggest probably not running that one. Just increase shock, and then after that, it's kind of just up to you. Projectile range and speed. Consume static to stun is nice. Otherwise, increased ally move speed. But really, just this alone is strong enough to make this thing insane. Discharge, super strong spell for PvE because applying AoE static is just never bad. Increased damage done by storm shields is the first and foremost thing that you want. Next thing you want is each storm shield gives you spell leech. Next thing you want is it charges your weapon up to 3 times. And then after that, it's kind of up to you. I'd probably do the recast if you want to do like an AoE, a little bit of damage. I would suggest doing that. Just honestly, What a strong spell overall. Being able to do this right here, bonus damage, and then spell leech are just super powerful with this spell. Cyclone. This one is a weird one. What I would suggest doing first and foremost is, where is it here? This right here, 100% chance. If you max it out, chance with the return projectile gives you another storm shield, so you can cast 1 to get 2. Then I would do increased damage of storm shield, spell life leech with those storm shields. So these 3 right here. Then I would do increase the damage. That right there is what I would suggest as the best in slot for this one personally. Is these 4 right here. Just massively boost the damage and give yourself a bunch of storm shields to do more damage that way. Then we have Veil of Storm right here. Veil of Storm, dashing through, inflict static, first and foremost, required. Your illusion periodically deals damage to enemies in AoE. And then you have damage next primary attack, super powerful. And then other than that, it doesn't really matter. Elude duration probably, consuming static stun doesn't really matter. Primary or fading snare doesn't really matter. So I would just do elude duration on this spell specifically. Polarity Shift, this one is insane for PvE. People, I was in my tier list video, people didn't really understand what I was talking about, what made this spell so strong for PvE. And what makes it so strong is it's 2 charges. And the thing is, while you are traveling in Polarity Shift, you are immaterial, you're invincible. So while you were traveling, you're invincible. So you can imagine like Megara or something is about to attack you, things are flying at you, you just cast Polarity Shift like this, and all those things just miss you. You're invincible while it's happening. On top of that, this is what makes this spell so utterly absurd in PvE. I think people are like, it's just not even doing that much damage. Why are you saying, it's only 90%? What's the big deal? Well, here's the thing. Triggering a Nova upon reaching destination and at your initial start, 60% spell power, 60% spell power on top of 90. We are at 210% spell power. I think it's still 60, right? Yeah, 60. 210% from 1 hit. Do it again. So that's, if you do both those together, it's 2 things of 210% spell power combined, which is just absolutely ridiculous. So my suggestion would be these 2 here, or these 3 here. So charging to do more damage on your auto attacks, these 2 Novas, and then range and speed right there for the most insanely crazy spell with a ton of uptime on iframe usage. All right. Lightning Curtain isn't super great for PvE overall. It can be useful early on to just have like a targeted static effect. But regardless, it's not all that useful. It's very niche. So certain things like if you're fighting like Simon Belmont, where he throws out his little blessed blades, you can use, somebody hit me for some reason. You can use Lightning Curtain like this. He's throwing out blessed blades. You can just throw that in front of him and they'll just eat it. Or something like Dracula. Anything with a bunch of projectiles, you can throw that and it's helpful. But honestly, just use something like Word of the Damned. It's way better. But overall, if you're going to use this spell for whatever reason, I would say increased damage dealt, blocking projectiles increases the damage, increased allied move speed, and passing through gives you shield. And finally, to the last but not least, most absurdly ridiculous spell in the game right now for damage and for just damage in general, PvE and PvP, if you can land them all. It's insane amounts of damage. What you want specifically first and foremost for PvE, launching additional bolt, that's 40% bonus magic damage. Every single hit has a chance to trigger chain lightning, insane. All of your lightning bolts deal bonus damage, insane. And then I would suggest running cast rate so you can get it off much faster. So altogether, you're doing hilarious amounts of damage and you're casting it much faster. Makes this thing hit like an absolute truck. But anyway, that is going to be it for this video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. That was a lot to take in, I know. But regardless, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you in the next one.